everyone that is coming in. Uh, Welcome to another Red Talks. If this is your first time joining us, Red Talk stands for Raiders Engaged in Diversity. Each of these conversations that we have with different members from across the university to talk about different subjects as it pertains to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're really excited about today. Today is kind of our holiday episode, I guess you could kind of say. And we have some fantastic panelists that joined us today that we are going to be talking about the topic of hard conversations during the holiday season. Everyone's either getting ready to meet with their loved ones, be it either virtually or a small little gathering to stay within social distancing regulations. And as always, holidays, people want to know what's going on, what's happening, what's new in your life. And we thought it would be fun to have a conversation about that and how to navigate that, hopefully. And yeah, I'm excited to introduce you to some of our panelists. I'm gonna go off of who I have on my screen first. So Cory, if you wanna go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you, appreciate that. My name is Cory Hamilton and I use he, him pronouns. And I'm the director of Raider Education at Texas Tech. And Raider Education is a department within the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion that's pretty new within the last year. And so Raider Education exists to provide cultural intelligence and leadership development for students across campus. And we do workshops and presentations on lots of diversity and inclusion issues around inclusive leadership and talking about specific things like bias and responding to microaggressions, things like that with students, but also doing things like controversy with civility and how to have hard conversations. So this is really something I'm excited to be here for today. So thank you.
Thanks, Cory, we're happy to have you. Go next with Matt.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Hernandez. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the graduate assistant for peer education in the Office of LGBTQIA Education and Engagement. A lot of my work is centered around the practice of allyship. So I deliver a lot of presentations to departments, student groups, and just folks from the university on what they can do to support our marginalized students as it relates to gender and sexuality. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Matt. We appreciate you being here and appreciate the work that you're doing. Erika.
Hi, my name is Erika Brooks-Hurst. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I work at the TLPDC Teaching, Learning, and Professional Development Center. We support people who teach and support teaching excellence across campus. And I am the director of the Institute for Inclusive Excellence, which is a year-long fellowship program for faculty to engage in and think about issues related to their classroom, their teaching, any of those things as related to diversity, inclusion, ethics are sometimes sprinkled in there, quality, all of those things. And we support them in that program. And I do some other trainings on implicit bias and microaggressions and difficult conversations in the classroom.
Thanks, Erika. That work is amazing. Thank you for doing that. I know that trickles down and helps our students, which is what we're all here to do as well. So thank you for that. And everyone, real quick, once again, my name is Jake. I'm the public relations advisor here in the College of Media and Communication. My pronouns are he, and him. And yeah, let's get started. So as I was saying before, we know holidays can be a fun, but also a very stressful time. And like I was saying, usually this is a time where we're meeting up with family members that we haven't seen for a while, wanting to get caught up, and everyone always wants to kind of know a little bit of your business. So what have been some awkward topics of conversation that you have endured while home for the holidays? That can be past experiences or, something as recent as Thanksgiving or even getting ready for Christmas. So Anyone can go first.
I don't mind jumping in. I grew up in West Texas and I'm from West Texas. So my family's 3 hours south, which is in San Angelo, Texas. And especially when I first came into my feminist thought as an undergraduate, and then as I developed more into graduate school, oftentimes I felt like part of my activist work was to engage people in my journey of what I was learning. And so I have done both. I have wanted to engage in those conversations with grandma, aunts, uncles, sisters, siblings, all of that. And at first, like it always didn't end very well. Over time, I have learned my voice and my temperament, and when I have the bandwidth to do that and when I don't. I did cause a whole incident one Christmas over an American Girl doll, which I did not think was giving us many options just for young girls and women at the time for good representation. And so I made a whole deal out of that. It didn't go over very well. I have since learned how to maybe have those conversations and learn my timing a little bit better. So it's one of my examples from at home. I come from a really big, loud family, but I'm also the youngest, so in my sibling group. So it's kind of always kind of pushed off onto that. And so I fight really hard to be heard sometimes and to show people I know what I'm talking about.
I think I'm in a similar situation. I come from East Texas, small town of Athens. And just by looking at those demographics, you can make the assumption about how folks are over there. It's not very different. I mean, it's pretty true for the entire state of Texas. But there's no hiding my identity when it comes to the work I do. I mean, you can't really hide that. Like, my life has pretty much turned into doing LGBT work at Texas Tech. And so when my family found out about that, that's kind of how we started having that conversation about how I'm not, I don't identify as heterosexual. But there was also this assumption that because I work in the LGBT office, that means I'm gay, which is not true. I identify as bisexual. And I think that it can get really awkward when it comes to thinking about like the stress that my family has. So when they found out that I was bisexual, they said, okay, so that means that there's still the potential that you will end up with a woman. So it's kind of like there's still that possibility that you'll be normal. And I think that was recently something that came up. It was a little bit awkward because my partner now is a white woman. So that means that my family kind of had that sigh of relief that, oh, he's not with the man, everything's fine, everything's normal. But I think that, you know, for me, it's about being happy. It's not about fitting into that norm. It just so happens that the person who makes me happy is a woman who is white. So there are no problems that they found. And so I think that it was a little bit awkward. It wasn't bad. It was just one of those things that wasn't really talked about. I will say that it was really bad when my family first found out that I worked in the LGBT office. It was about a year ago. And then that's when those conversations started taking place. They happened when I was younger, but they were a lot more very put your foot down. You will not be with a man. You will not be gay. You will not dress feminine. You will be this way. And then I think that when I came to college, that's when I realized, wow, this is really not something that's bad. I can be myself. And that's when I think that for a lot of young people, that's when they begin to explore their identities. And then that's why going back home for the summer or for winter break, that's a really stressful experience for a lot of people. And so I think it's important to have these types of conversations.
Yeah, I think for me, it's similar in living in different worlds, but very, very different in those worlds that I come from. I was born in Southwest Minnesota in a small farm community. And so my father is a retired farmer who lives in a town of 59 people that all know each other very well. And he has many, many siblings, having grown up on a farm. So I have lots of aunts and uncles, lots and lots of cousins. But my parents split when I was young, and my mom actually moved to Texas and remarried. And so I grew up in Austin, going to school in Austin, listening to live music downtown in Austin, but then would spend my summers on the farm, baling hay, bottle feeding calves, cleaning hog barns. And so I find that kind of my experience is straddling this these two very different communities and two very different kind of expectations. And so my rural family, I love them. Every one of them would give you the shirt off of their back. But based on their experience and kind of the life that they've had, many of them are openly racist and not apologetic about it. And so some of the awkward conversations that I've been a part of in my time going back and visiting family, for a long time, many of my cousins and uncles and aunts referred to me as their Obama-loving nephew. And I really think that they would have preferred to use a different word than Obama. And that became very difficult to have conversations about the work that I found to be important. And I think more recently, this year, with everything going on with COVID, my family, both my mom and my dad, the both sides are much more traditional and have much more conservative views and follow a lot of political beliefs that, kind of think that some of these things are a hoax and some of these things are, the very fringe ideas of, we can't just stop our lives for these kinds of things. And so my family, my immediate family, my partner and children and I are the only ones that are choosing to socially distance. Everybody else is gathering. And so there's been a lot of conversations around, well, we're not going to fault you for it. We think it's ridiculous, these kinds of things, but definitely on the outskirts of those conversations with our family. So yeah, so some awkward conversations about those things.
Gotcha. Thanks. Thank you all. And Cory, you're hitting on some stuff that we're definitely going to talk about as we get further in. But one of the things that I wanted to discuss is because something that I kind of saw as just like kind of a common trait through all the stories is circling around the topic of identity. So a lot of this comes back to, how a lot of us identify ourselves and the parts that make up that identity. And that's where we see some of that headbutting or that stress come into play, is because how are we staying true to ourselves and also trying to be with the ones that we love, even though sometimes it's a little hard to be around those people. So you were talking a little bit about your household, Cory. And so just for everyone here is like, that you can't always change and always get people to be on your same side of things. So how do you work around getting just even the conversation in your household to being an open communication with one another?
Sure, and I can speak to that real quick about what I've found to be helpful for me. One is having a support system that I can rely on outside of that. So especially if I'm feeling super frustrated or isolated, trying to have like a text chain with a few of my friends or people that I consider, to be on my side and, understand the world the way that I do. So I do that. I'm lucky to partner with somebody who I can share that with. And so we, we'll break off sometimes and kind of divide and conquer, or say, I'm lucky that I can use my partner's privilege. I have a really, really tall white husband. And so he sometimes can get away with saying things and be heard, and we're aware of that privilege. So we talk about like, maybe you should say that, because he's not as outspoken as me, or kind of he backs me up, so having somebody who kind of backs you up. But then also, like, I have found to just sometimes tell people where I'm coming from and just say, I understand we're different, but you know, I've studied this and I've read a lot of books on it. I'm not just being provocative to be provocative. I say that a lot. I'm saying this because it's attached to people's lives that I love and that, you know, suffer from these ways of thinking. And so I, you know, if they're harmful to groups. So I try and meet people there. And then also I sometimes say, let's just not talk about that. I can love you and I can appreciate some different things about us being family members, but maybe if we're going to have this conversation, we both need to read the same material before we do, or maybe we both. So I'll often tell people we can engage on that, but we've got to be working from the same framework first. So just like I would with one of my students, like, let's read. I mean, I try to find something really digestible and you know, if you really want to have this conversation, we could read something and talk about it over coffee or do something like that. But I'm not, I no longer want to get into just like opinions a lot of times because it just ends up like being really frustrating to me. So I try and set really clear boundaries with people because, of course, like I said, I'm the youngest, and people in my family, I always tell people, my brother-in-law's known me since I was 18 years old. So he'll go, you know, he'll try to get something out of me or say something. And so now I'm aware of that. But when I was younger, I would just bite and, you know, take it on. But now I'll just say things like, I heard you. I'm not going to talk about that with you. You know, we've been there before, and we're not going to go there unless we're both reading or looking at the same thing, you know, and then we can engage then.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like Erika hit the nail on the head with establishing that framework, and also having guidelines for having these conversations, establishing that I want to be respected and I will reciprocate that back to you. A lot of this comes from discussions of politics in my family. I am 100% the outlier when it comes to that. And so I'm not, you know, when someone says, oh, I'm going to vote this particular way in this election, and I don't call them dumb, I don't call them ignorant, even though I may feel that they are ignorant to some issues. But what I do is I give them a different perspective. And I'm also not trying to change people's minds, especially with the work that I've done here with diversity work in general in West Texas. You've got to learn that you cannot change people's minds overnight. And so I think that it is all about incrementalism. And when you have these conversations and give folks different perspectives, so for example, me saying, okay, well, let's talk about that. You supporting this ideology, this particular person, let me talk to you about how that harms me. And you talk about all the time how you care so much about me. I want to talk to you about the identities that I hold. You may not care about them that much, but I still hold them. And if you care about me that much, then you will listen to what I have to say. And then I'll be specific, outline different things, and, you know, try to put the puzzle together in their minds. And, you know, give them that different perspective instead of talking about like gun control and all that stuff, even though it's really important. Talking about, okay, this is impacting someone who you hold near and dear to your heart. And I think that I've made a lot of progress with people who I hold close in my family in that regard. So I think that being respectful and also being patient, those are two of the most important things when it comes to having these types of conversations.
I'll echo the same thing. And I just, I know within our own family, I talk with my daughters about, you know, conversations in a conversation, you know, if you believe something to be true, and if you, my three daughters at the moment are really into protesting things, whether it's getting more desserts or if their textbook doesn't have something that is feminist enough for them, they will create posters and start marching around the house. That doesn't stop when we get together with family and somebody says something. And so we've had to have a conversation a little bit about like, you know, we can't call people dumb because they don't believe the same thing. But the relationship is as important as winning the argument, especially with family, because family is family forever. And so these are people that we care about, that do care about us. And so how do you walk that kind of balancing act? And I think Matt put it really well with thinking about incrementalism. And I've found in my experience, of not being argumentative, not trying to change minds in one conversation, but to really share personal experience. And so oftentimes I find myself sharing stories of students that I've advised and counseled, my experience working with students who were homeless and the experience of trying to get through college. One of the common themes that I often kind of come into contact with within my own family is everyone should be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, you know, work hard. Everybody here worked hard. Everybody here has, you know, achieved some amount of success. Others should be able to do that as well. And so in my work, I've definitely come across experiences where there are systems in place that keep people from just being able to work hard and to meet that same level of success. And so having conversations and telling stories about people I've worked with, experiences that I've had, you know, has been helpful. And rather than making it about an opinion or that they're wrong, just kind of as Matt said, let me tell you about someone I've worked with and how that doesn't work for them. And slowly but surely, it's been interesting that we can have conversations now that we definitely could not have had 5 or 6 years ago. You know, because of them hearing some of those stories, and especially with my father and one of my uncles who is very engaged and wanting to engage in this conversation. I also find the other thing is I have a couple of things that are my go-tos that I know we have in common, right? So that no matter if we want to talk about political issues or things of faith and spirituality, we're going to differ on a lot of stuff. But there are a couple of core things that are relationship builders that I can kind of pull out when necessary, when there's a lot of conflict. Sports in my family is one that, I'll be honest, for me, sports, I am not a live or die by sports kind of person. I enjoy it, but I can be a live or die by sports kind of person in those relationships, and be prepared to talk about that. And there are some political issues and things that I know we do agree on. And so then I can pull out those things to be like, now let's build some common ground, and then work from that space. So yeah, I think there's almost a switching of that conversation and trying to pull in the positives so that you can kind of move forward. But remembering that the relationship is as important as the topic, especially when dealing with family, I think is an important one.
Thank you. And Cory, yeah, like one of the things that you mentioned was definitely thinking about the relationship, and overall, you're wanting to maintain that. I mean, that's part of what the holiday season's about, is because these people are people that you have those strong relations with, whether it's family or friends, and you want to maintain that. But yes, as you all said, people's opinions do differ, and that's the biggest challenge, I think, just in daily conversation in general, is that everyone's opinions are different. But at the end of the day, that's only a part of us. There's still so much more there. And so I liked how, Cory, you were talking about like switching into different subjects to kind of de-escalate some of the conversations that may be had and where they're turning. And of course, because Erika, you had brought this up when you're talking about kind of the sense of being baited, where there's someone there who just knows how to push those buttons, and they're like, but let's talk about this, even though you're like, no, don't want to talk about it. Let's get over it. What are some ways that you have kind of had to de-stress from that? Because you know, like family members are trying to pick at you, they're trying to get things going on, or people are just having their own conversations that you can overhear, and you understand, like you hear them and you're like, I don't agree completely. What are some ways that y'all just de-stress, like whether it's like walking out of the room, taking a breath? Some people will have that occasional glass of wine. What are some ways that you guys have de-stressed from that, and ways that other members from our staff community can de-stress?
I try to find a distraction. So for example, coloring, even though it sounds very childish, I like to color. I'm not very good at it, but it's a really good distraction. So I, take myself away from other people if I hear those things going on around me. But recently, since I don't live at home, I've gotten a little bit more brave with being confrontational, saying, okay, well, what was just said is not okay. And, I don't have that fear of well, this is my house, you stay in my house, I buy your food and all that stuff. Like, yeah, they support me, but I don't live there. So I think it's really different now in terms of how I approach those different situations. So I think for me, it's finding a distraction. And if I feel that it is that blatant of a conversation that's happening, intervening and saying this conversation should not be happening.
Yeah, I think I recognize my own privilege that I've never had to deal with like the fear of my family, you know, saying you can't be here, or this is any of my ideas or opinions or things or that of my partner are not so so far off that or that my family has such beliefs that I have to live with that fear. And so I hear, you know, Matt, that experience, and I'm really sorry that you've had to deal with that. For me, you know, distractions are good. Some mindfulness, the more than occasional glass of wine, yes. But also finding activities that, again, kind of focus on that relationship is one that I think my family has really invested in. And so there are things that have become family traditions, like doing puzzles, where it's hard to talk about really deep stuff when you're so focused in. We, you know, gather around and we've kind of made it a challenge to get through like a 2,000 piece puzzle in 4 days, you know, and so people are just constantly coming to this space. And so setting up those distractions. Also kids, I find that kids are a really easy way if you're in a family with kiddos. People don't want to be confrontational in those ways typically around kids. So invite the kids into play or to be in part of the conversation to talk about something. And I found that that's a really good distraction for me. I like kids. If you don't like kids, then I'm sorry, that one might not work for you. If your nieces and nephews are more stress than anxiety helping. But yeah, so that's kind of what I think we do. Because avoiding is tough, because especially like Matt said, when there are topics that come up that you think are really wrong, or the conversation turns to something that is really inappropriate and harmful, speaking up is important, but then having you know, some way to also, again, mend that relationship is also important.
And I would just second everything people said. Sometimes even if you know there's going to be kids around, to like plan on doing like find a quick like activity to do, like a arts and craft or something, and just be in charge of that, or you're cooking something. I will say my most pleasant Christmas was when I had a newborn and I breastfed that kid, because you can always say, oh, I got to go feed the kid. And you can be in a room by yourself. Nobody could come in there with you. And we would do that, but then we would look at my phone and look at other things and take a nap. And so just if you could plan, if you are able to plan, like to have your own car, or you could go on a drive if you needed to, or be the person that goes to the store if you need a break, or some things like that, that you can give yourself a break with doing, or you can plan to take all the kids to the park or something like that. Again, you have to like kids to do that, but you could be the person who's going to go and pick up the stuff from the store. I think just giving yourself breaks, because I know sometimes I have a really hard time when I hear stuff not to interject, because it's just my personality type. So it would be better if I could just remove myself from the situation. So just trying to think of different things like that you could do that would keep you separate a little bit.
Yeah, no, and all of you, once again, kind of have around the idea, like there's a little bit of avoidance in there, which is just, you know, taking yourself out of the situation, and that is completely fine. Yes, it's the holidays. Yes, we need to be around each other. Like that's always a nice thing. But of course, there is those moments where you can't always have that pressure on you, and so it is definitely fine to take a moment, step away, take a drive, take a nap. I love how you all have those suggestions about even just including different activities like doing puzzles, playing with kids, things like that. And I'm glad that y'all brought that up, because I feel that that is important to confirm for a lot of people who are going to be meeting with family or having family around, is that it's okay to step aside for a while, because that's something to bring you back down to level space and keep you level-headed. And so thank you all for that. I think that that is something that needs to be reiterated. One of the things that I do want to bring up is that I know, Matt, you were discussing about how you're away from family a little bit, you know, they're there, they support you, things like that, but you've been able to kind of get comfortable with having a little confrontation. And I think this year, especially with everything that's gone on, everything that's been 2020, but most specifically this pandemic, a lot of people have been having a hard time with the idea of having a virtual Christmas or not having the whole family together to, you know, partake in traditions or anything like that. So there's going to be those moments where there is going to be that little bit of confrontation, because you might have a family member that's like, come on, we'll only be together for an hour, like, we'll be okay. Oh, I don't need to wear a mask, there's only 6 of us, or all this kind of stuff. How, for those who are trying to stay within social distancing guidelines and trying to do their part in what's going on, I mean, what are some like ways around those conversations and having that little bit of confrontation, not full out, you know, family war over mask or anything, but just even discussing, I know y'all talked about like, this is how I see it, this is why we need to do it, but what are some suggestions or helpful hints that y'all would give for that conversation that's coming up? Or have y'all had that conversation?
I'll just say good luck. I'll be honest. I'll dive into the mud on this one and say it's been hard and it's been terrible. So like both of my families, both sides of my family are gathering for the holidays and planning to gather for the holidays. We will be probably the only ones not participating at this point. My family was together this past weekend for my nephew's first birthday and baptism, and we were the only ones that did not participate. And so there's a lot of feeling of, I mean, we've had conversations about like, are we crazy? Are we the ones that are doing something that isn't normal, right? And at the same time, you know, my mom and stepfather have both had coronavirus, and my grandmother, in the midst of all of this, because they have jobs that they can't do at a distance. And I have two nieces, or one niece who is health compromised. And you know, when I've brought those conversations up with them and said, you know, that I was fearful for them, even if they weren't fearful, and it added stress into my week. You know, using kind of the old faithful I statements about how I'm feeling about it, and you know, and pointing out some of those things, taking the stand and kind of saying, well, you know, you may feel like the risk that you're taking isn't large for you, but you know, if everybody is, or the majority of folks are doing this, then that risk is compounded. And so it hasn't been easy. And so I don't know if I have a good tip other than to be honest with yourself. If, you know, with what you're comfortable with, and understand that this is a particularly difficult thing to talk about, because you're really pitting the values that are being kind of pitted against each other right now are those family values of getting together, those longstanding cultural traditions that are so ingrained in families and communities. And then this sense of safety and health security. And I know kind of all three of us mentioned this in the beginning of but that's really impacting marginalized and minoritized communities so much more. And so for many of us that come from privileged backgrounds, you know, it's hard to explain that to your family, to say like, it might not affect you, but if you carry and then pass it on, that affects someone else. And so, you know, we've had that conversation, and there have been some tears. And in the end, there was not necessarily a resolution because we still are not attending. They're still having a big family gathering for not just a day, but like multiple days together. And it's hard. It's really hard. So Stay strong.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Stay strong. I actually come from a family of medical professionals, so they are exposed. They have been exposed. Both my parents worked on a COVID floor back home, and then they both contracted it. And so it's tough. But I think that in this regard, there is a lot of awareness around, the importance of masks, the importance of social distancing. And about 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And for the past 4 years, I've been learning, more and more about this disease. And then when COVID came around, I learned that I'm at a higher risk of contraction and of dying from it if I did get it. And so that's what my mother told me. And so she's been very cautious when coming around me in just, gatherings in general. And so I got lucky with, them being in that field, knowing the importance of distance and being safe in a pandemic. But there have been times where, like, for example, she wasn't wearing a mask. And I'm like, you need to put your mask on if you're around me. And she's like, oh, yeah, you're right. And like, we're going into a public place, for example. Like at home, it's not that big of a deal because we are, everyone's kind of spread apart until like a vaccine comes around. Just because everyone seems to be aware of the risks associated with transmission and all those types of things. But if I do feel in danger, then I will kind of distance myself away. And the people who are aware of, why that is, they're okay with it. And so I think that those types of conversations can be difficult, just like what Cory said. But for me, it's just as simple as saying, I'm like, can you put your mask on around me? I don't feel comfortable being this close. I don't feel comfortable being in a large public space. So those types of things.
And I think they've summed it up. I don't have much more to add.
Awesome. Well, thank y'all. Yeah. It's nice hearing both sides of those stories because, I mean, Matt, your family is a little bit more understanding. Cory, I'm sorry, your family's having that struggle. I can relate. Coming from a Latino background, our families like to get together. They like to see each other, have lots of food, all that kind of stuff. And especially with people who have multi-generation, like have multiple generations in their household. Grandma doesn't really understand why she can't see her grandson or things like that. And so it has been hard to have those constant little, I've been calling them reminders. It's just trying to like remind them like, hey, wear your mask, hey, stay 6 feet, all that kind of stuff to let them know. But it is one of those things that we just have to hold our own as best as we can, I guess, and try to work with everyone to still stay safe for one another. So kind of switching topics, because I know we can go on and on about the pandemic and everything else that's been going on. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and it's kind of because I saw this, I think it was Lifetime Hallmark movie, I'm not really sure what it was. But apparently there's been a lot of entertainment news, I'm really into entertainment, about a lot of LGBTQ-led holiday movies this year that haven't really been happening in the past. And that got me thinking about the holidays and the LGBTQ community just in general, and some of the experiences that come with the holidays. Speaking as someone who's part of the community myself, those times can be very stressful. They can be sometimes liberating, depending on where a person's at in their identity journey. So one of the questions that I had is, what are some ways that, and some advice that you would give to people to help make their home kind of a welcoming atmosphere for those dialogues and that conversation? Because Matt, I know you were talking about your experience and the difficulty that you had there, but like, what does that look like since you came out to now? I know that you you've had your issues. And for anyone else, like, what are some ways that you try to make your home an open space and welcoming space for people?
Thankfully, my family has become more welcoming and understanding. I think that they've come a long way when it comes to that particular part of my identity. I will also say that I think it's easy for people in the LGBT community to recognize one another. That's just speaking from my own perspective. Like, even the smallest of things, like if I see you wearing, for example, a bracelet with rainbow colors on it, I'm going to assume that you either identify as LGBT or you are a very visible ally. I've also been very grateful that I have people back home who are open about being allies to the LGBT community and other minoritized populations. So that is also a result of me being open about who I am. So not being closed off on social media. So talking about gender and sexuality, that lets people know that I might at times need someone to talk to about, you know, someone saying something problematic about my sexuality or anything like that. But I do know that that's also a privilege. So not everyone can talk about those things. It's a privilege for people to be out. And I think that for example, when you're at the university, a student is at the university, they can openly express themselves, gender, sexuality, faith, any identity. There's a place for everyone, at least here at Texas Tech. And I think that when it comes time to go back home, a lot of those identities go back in. So like sexuality, you go back in the closet. And we give a presentation in our office about home for the holidays, home for the summer. Home for the summer is fun in the sun or back in the closet. So it's about, you know, being open or having to conceal that part of your identity. And so I think that, you know, being out is a privilege. And I think that what's most important is that people find helping hands at the university before they go home, or helping hands, you know, somewhere in the community where they can freely express themselves. Because there may be times where you get outed when you go back home, where your identity gets revealed. Someone asks you a question and then it ends up, you know, coming up, and then everyone knows. So I think that having those helping hands is good, and also utilizing resources that are at your disposal.
And I can jump in with some things that I do as a straight person to show allyship at the holidays, or just disrupt some norms so that people know that I am safe, or that I am like somebody who's gonna be accepting, you know, and that they could talk to or go on the car ride with, or whatever it may be that they need a break. I work really hard at disrupting language that we have, like heteronormed language. So I have a 7-year-old kid. So anytime, which I try to curtail all like boyfriend, girlfriend talk, but when people, if they try to engage in those conversations, I'll say, no, Leo doesn't have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. I have a son, you know, or I'll like open, that's kind of, and that's very radical for my family. So like even saying that, they get the point. But, or I'll say, you know, if they try to norm him in one way or another, or like when I'm playing with kids, you know, I try to, like, I'm always with the kids, obviously. I'm like, well, my Barbie's going to marry this Barbie, because mainly I want the other people around me to know, and then also those kids as they grow up to know I'm open and safe and somebody who you don't have to hide who you are around. And so I try to do some of those things. I mean, those have been hit with a little bit of resistance sometimes, like, but I try and do those things. I try and make sure that like the language we're using is really inclusive to different faiths, different, and then just different family makeups, you know, that it's not just this really like nuclear family. And then I try, if nothing else, I try to, like Cory said, to insert stories or have a friend over that does represent, if I'm in a place that I have friends where people do know, like, oh, this isn't just like heterosexual, you know, people, like that there's other people, you know, and not that, however it may come up, you know, whether it be like the Christmas cards that you get from people, what's hanging up and who's represented in those and what, you know, but making sure that we have some different things represented. I think those movies are one, but there's not near enough of how do we envision these things. There's not enough with the holidays in general, like we celebrate Christmas, not enough race or gender difference or sexuality differences represented. So I'm always looking for different ways to just put those, one, on my son's radar, like that he doesn't feel that there's only one way, and then also for people who in our home or when we go other places.
Yeah, I would say for specifically to your question, Jake, around the, you know, the inclusive of the LGBTQ plus community, I think we definitely do. I personally, and my family tries to do things as well that are that visibly show allyship, and that there's a safe space and that there is a resource, whether that's in our offices on campus or in our home when we're visiting extended family, and those kinds of things. Same thing, using language. I refer to my partner, and I am married to a woman, and a lot of some of my cousins and uncles don't get that. You know, why would you want people to think you're gay? You know, and it's obviously not about wanting people to think I'm gay, but to normalize the language and the experience, and so doing some of those kinds of things. But I think also Erika kind of mentioned this. In my previous work, I actually worked for a Lutheran bishop in doing leadership development work, and so I come from a Christian background, but always part of what we worked with our youth was being open and inclusive of other faith practices, and so that's something that with our own children, with our families too. We like to incorporate some traditional elements, or make sure that there are some things that they experience that are not just the things that they've always felt comfortable with, and so that those don't become, or so when they experience them elsewhere, they're not brand new and they're not surprised by that. And so, like one of our daughters has a pen pal who celebrates Diwali, and so they get to talk to each other and write letters back and forth and ask questions about what they're doing, what traditions they're doing, things like that. But we also have elements in our home from different holiday traditions to point out that other people do those things as traditional fun activities, and here's the background from what we understand. And so when other people come into our home, they would see that as well. And so sometimes it's brought up questions from our own family. You know, why would you have a Hindi book right next to the nativity at Christmas time? You know, and it's like, well, that's another story very similar that other faith traditions have. And so that's something that we try to do as well on that kind of, because this can be a very isolating time, especially in West Texas. You know, I definitely have friends who are staff members and faculty members here at Texas Tech and others in the community that have either come here from other parts of the states or come here internationally. And Christmas is a very isolating time for international students, you know, things like that. We've invited international students, you know, to our home in the past for Thanksgiving meals and Christmas meals, like holiday meals, and then asked them to share some of their traditions, or made sure that we had some kind of traditional food or something like that. And so those are ways that I think we find to try to be inclusive and take that holiday spirit to, you know, to open up, whether it's our families or our own community or just my immediate family. Yeah.
I thought of one more thing that I do with my nieces. I have a lot of nieces. If we're doing something that may be what's considered a girl activity, like painting nails or they always want me to put makeup or paint their face. I never say like, oh, you can't do that, you're a boy, or like if we're doing it, everybody can do it and it's fun. And I try to make like, or if we're coloring and somebody's like, why would he get that? I always try to disrupt all of that stuff, because I think like I'm also trying to model to the other adults, like there's not such thing as a girl coloring sheet and a boy coloring sheet. There's all, their coloring sheets are just for fun. Makeup's just for fun. Paint's just for fun, like it's not. So I'm always trying to like redefine some of those activities as well. Like that baking's not just for the girls, like we're going to all bake something together. So just that's another way to kind of disrupt some of those norms, I think, and make everybody feel a little more included and let to pick what they want to do over the holidays, instead of feeling like if I'm a boy, I got to be watching the football game, on the TV, even though I'm 6 and it's totally boring, like, no, you don't have to do that. You can paint your toenails too, because that's fun.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like how you are all talking about kind of just the disruption of holiday norms and making sure that you're just making your households very inclusive spaces for people. Because I like how, yes, we started this with talking about LGBTQ community, making sure your house is welcoming for them. But Erika and Cory, to your points, y'all kind of talked a little bit about like just overall, just culture wise, is like making sure that you're opening your household up to showcasing members of your family, different cultures and how they celebrate it, and just making sure that any culture can be welcome to your house and not have to feel that they're too much like on eggshells or anything like that, but that they can actually be welcome there. I know that that's a really big thing right now, because as a Latino, I mean, we have a lot of family traditions that we try to keep in place, like making tamales, making huevos and things like that. Like we have these different things in place, and so it's good to know that other people are trying to incorporate some of those things. Maybe not to that extent. Tamales are hard to make, so I don't blame anyone for not trying to make them.
We always have them, but we don't make them. They're hard to make.
Bless my grandmother. I don't know how she's done it so many years. She's always making like 30 to 50 dozen, and I'm just like, where does this come from?
That's our Christmas Eve dinner, but yeah, that's always been, but yeah, they're too hard to make.
Yeah, no, trust me. I've been recruited to make them, and I'm 27 years old, and they barely like trust me to put the masa onto the little corn husk. Like, that's all I can do. I can't cook anything, but I can scrape it onto the corn husk. That's my responsibility.
I have scars from the lefse making in my family that comes from a nice traditional Norwegian Christmas of making potato pancakes, lefse. And so the lefse grill has left me scarred. So
yeah, that is a good way to just bring in something totally different than like if you pick up some other, like something that you have never even just look up something, you could incorporate all different kinds of cultural kind of food is a good place, but like, or a movie or something, where you just change it up for everybody. That also could give you a different focus, right? You're not focusing on all of these things that could be hard, but you're making something new and different just to try.
Exactly. No, 100%. And actually, Erika, you kind of hit on something that I think we're going to go ahead and like start closing this out. But yeah, talking about incorporating some new things into your household, some possible new traditions. But even on that note, because yes, this year is going to be different. So what are some virtual traditions or virtual activities that you've been seeing around town, whether it's here in Lubbock? I know I just saw something about like they're going to make Santaland now a drive-through experience, whether they can get off. But what are some other ways, like this can even be like a little 5-minute quick brainstorming session, or if you've done something already, that people can incorporate some of those new traditions to deal with that. And whether it's like bringing in a new movie, bringing in new food, what are some other ways that y'all feel people can be doing that?
I can tell you one that my mom thought of for Thanksgiving. I'm one of 4, and we didn't come together for Thanksgiving, and she had asked us all to send a picture of our spread for Thanksgiving, and then she said everybody needed to like cooperate, meaning because we're not always the best at that, meaning that in your family somebody needed to contribute to something, and then we all shared those pictures on the day of, like a picture of our table, and then we said like, my son made this, I made that, and just kind of where people still could see what we were doing, but not be there. We all FaceTime too, or Zoom called, but just kind of thinking of like, oh, you can still share what you're doing. It just may have to take a different kind of form where than maybe being all together.
I can say I invested in a little bit of technology, and that was buying a couple of like board game platforms that you can do online. So with my family, we have gotten together a few times, and I mean, I think I spent $40, but you know, I'm like, I haven't driven to Austin, San Antonio, or Dallas once in the last 9 months. So that's more than covered gas for visiting family. So so investing in something like that, or there are watching movie together platforms where you're talking about some of those movies that might be a little bit more inclusive, that you could say, hey, let's have a Hallmark movie night. Let's just watch you know, even if the lead is, you know, from the LGBT community, it's still going to be corny as anything, right? So let's just watch a really hokey, corny Christmas movie all together. Everybody make hot chocolate, and there's like streaming services where you can all watch it at the exact same time, and actually comment on it together, and you know, something silly like that to make it a tradition now, and maybe that becomes an in-person tradition later, or something like that. So maybe
I thought of one more when you're talking, and I know Cory's family likes this, but I know you can do taste, but you could all cook the same thing, like brownies, like a British bake-off kind of thing, and look at presentation or something like that, and all take the picture and vote. Sorry, I just thought of that one. I'm sure there's better ideas out there than this, and I was just thinking, we did that for my son's birthday this year. Me and my husband both made brownies and then had him like judge, but that would be a way everybody could kind of be doing the same thing, but not, you could all look at it and see. You couldn't taste it, but
I'd be the one to burn the food if we did that. Yeah. But you know, with the onset of the pandemic, towards the beginning, in our office, the staff, there are 5 of us, we are all very close to one another. And so when it started, we all knew that everyone was going to be somewhat isolated and having, you know, feelings of loneliness. And so we invested in things like Jackbox, which is what Cory was, similar to like what Cory was referencing, with online gaming that's like synchronous live. You can see everyone's responses. That can get a little wild. But we've also done, even before the pandemic, we did like watch parties on Netflix. I think there are free extensions on Chrome that you can install. You'll have to have a Netflix account, but you can watch it together, leave comments in the little chat box that it has on there. Yeah, so I love watching movies with other people, even at a distance. I'm glad that that's possible. I love me a good corny gay movie, especially if it's Hallmark. That'd be really good. So yeah, I think that technology really makes possibilities limitless when it comes to things like doing things that we're used to doing with other people.
No, I think those are all great ideas, especially for people who are going to be virtually meeting with people from outside of the West Texas, Lubbock area. I know for us, thankfully, most of my family is from here, which kind of makes things a little hard to not meet in person. But I know that we've just decided to do things like going to the drive-in to watch the Christmas movies that they're going to have out there together. We're going to do a car meetup at Tech to go around and look at the lights over there. And what was the other thing that we were going to do? Oh, and then, yeah, drive through the Santaland thing. So, I mean, there's definitely things like that to do, especially.
Yeah, I didn't know Santaland was doing a drive-through, so I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot
just
of
be prepared for the line.
Oh, did y'all do it?
We were going to go Saturday. We were going to go. And we literally got off the freeway, and it was backed up all the way Broadway into downtown, was backed up. So we're doing it again tonight, but we're getting like food in the car, and we're gonna
to wait it out
front eating dinner when it opens at 6. So just know that is a great option, I think. But
yeah, we just drove around last night and looked at some Christmas lights. I mean, there's some people have gone really big for Christmas lights this year. And I think it's because everybody's feeling a little sad. One person, I'm pretty sure, like, there was not 1 inch of their front yard that wasn't covered in lights. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I've done that too. Like me and my partner went and looked, and I didn't realize Lubbock has got some loud houses.
Yeah,
On the
they're my
south side.
favorite.
Yeah, but they're the ones that are decorated. And then there's also like a house that syncs up to a radio station. It's off of Indiana and like 50 something down there.
Yeah, are they the ones that
Yep,
their neighbors have ditto and the pointing? Yeah,
yep.
so
I
yeah,
love that.
that's our
Love
favorite.
it so much.
There is just to tell you, there is there's a tricky one that doesn't advertise. That one ends up getting cars backed up on Indiana trying to get in to see it. There's another one right over by where we used to live, off of Elgin, right by Waters Elementary School.
Uh-huh.
Like I think it's Elgin and maybe 75th. Theirs is incredible, and there's never anybody there. We've driven past that one twice because there's like they have it syncing like 25, 30 songs, so you can go see it, and it's always different. So some good classic, hits, but then they throw in some other like unexpected things. You're like, oh. So if you don't want to wait in line somewhere, sneak over there, just off of kind of behind Furr's Cafeteria by Waters Elementary. It's a really good one.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to find one that does a light show to Hamilton. I saw a video about that on Facebook.
Ooh, that's such a good idea.
Where is that here in Lubbock? But
it's so hard. I mean, I just put up a few Christmas lights on my house. It's hard work. Those people must like take a day off of work to do that. That is intense. I love it.
I know I need to find that dedication because that's just like
yeah, me too.
I don't know how they get through that. But we are at time. I do want to thank the panelists for coming. Your stories, your advice, suggestions, everything was great. This is going to be an interesting holiday season, but I have hope that it's going to be great for everyone. Make sure everyone who's listening to just take care of yourselves, focus on you and your family, know what you need, and we'll make it through. So happy holidays, everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy holidays.
And we'll see y'all next year.
Thank y'all for being here.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank y'all.